So like I mentioned, there are political windows, and that's when you're going to see the height of that advertising. You will see the issue money spent being spent beyond those windows. So not necessarily will there be a timeline in which they'll do it. We know that they're going to spend more closer to the election, but I think advertisers need to be prepared and not question, because I've done it myself, when a vendor comes to you and says this was bumped by political, and you are sitting in the month of June and you're past the primaries and the election's still months away. This can still have an impact no matter the time period within the election year.
And I know that you had this to share, so I want to make sure that I'm doing it justice, even though it won't let me really. But this graph that you brought us, can you explain what it is?
Yeah, so this just talks about the growth specifically of political digital advertising. So not only are we seeing tremendous growth overall, we are seeing tremendous growth in digital media, with connected TV being one of the fastest growing areas within digital, where we're seeing that political spend having an impact.
Okay. Thank you. And I know we want to bring in some of the digital discussion too, because I think people will categorize the newer mediums like CTV and OTT, not that they're that new, but they're not considered traditional, I guess, but they'll categorize it in either media and or digital. So what do we want to talk about when it comes to what we've seen, when it comes to timelines and these more digital opportunities? What would we like to share with our audience?
Yeah, I think from sorry, Amanda, but just speaking to, some of the social aspects, I think a lot of these kind of high profile social platforms like X and TikTok and Facebook are staying away a little bit more than you would expect. I know TikTok's not allowing political advertising whatsoever. I believe Spotify has really gone away from it, and then Facebook, they're very stringent with some of the targeting capabilities that you can actually have on social. So in previous elections, we've seen, Facebook in particular, and Meta properties really play a role through all of the information and kind of the cheap eyeballs you can get on political advertising. And Meta has definitely taken a stronger stance against some of that messaging and kind of put their foot in the ground. So yes, you can still have political advertising, but the targeting capabilities are much, much, much less severe. So more of a generalized messaging. So still plenty of, impressions available through Facebook advertising for businesses.
Yeah, let's break down some of those. Go ahead, Amanda, and then we'll touch.
Yeah. So Meta too, I'm sure you guys have seen, they are limiting the amount of political messaging that their users are exposed to. Like, they have decided that for them, and you have to manually go in and manipulate your settings if you choose to have more of a political awareness within your Facebook feed, which I think is really interesting.
Yeah, well, it's clearly a direct response because they obviously love the advertising dollars, but I think it's going to have an interesting play the closer we get, because Meta, X, and Google do allow political advertising, but limiting it to their own. Each platform has their own rules. Snapchat is leaning into it.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So these other platforms are being a little bit more stringent this year. Snapchat is leaning all the way in. So they have partnered with vote.org. You can, right within the app, register to vote. I think they're doing pieces with NBC News, things like that, but all in the hopes of getting more political advertising and grabbing those dollars. And I believe an article just came out from Business Insider that said they are poised for revenue growth and rebound as a result of these efforts. And I think, Drew, you had mentioned Spotify, and they did for a time restrict and said that they weren't going to accept any political advertising, but they actually changed that in 22, just in time for the 22 elections. And I think they said that it was, so that they could have their house in order, but I'm sure that they are also seeing this trend of digital.
They're seeing the billions available, and it changes people's minds.
Let me get in on that.
It's a slippery slope. They don't want to seem like they're actively kind of advocating for a specific candidate or a specific party on a specific issue. But of course, there's, as we mentioned, billions of dollars at stake that, they want a piece of that puzzle. So I think it's an interesting piece to kind of continue to look at throughout the next few elections, is how does social media play a role, especially in like an aging populace? How do you reach younger voters? Because I think, while broadcast kind of still is the king with the CTV, we're seeing the growth in the CTV. I would imagine that that's only going to continue, where fewer people are actually still buying cable. I know I'm probably the only millennial that still actually has cable, but every single one of my friends are good are on YouTube TV and connected products. So that's kind of where I think political dollars will continue going.
Yeah, I think that makes complete sense. Like, we know the everyday advertiser media consumption habits are changing. They're leaning more digital. So it makes complete sense that political advertising dollars would follow suit. Not to mention, while they have limited targeting, they can geopolitically target. So they are able to, especially in these state and local races, reach key voters at a very cost efficient way.
Jen, jump right in.
Sure. Drew, to your point, I just saw an interesting research article that shows that cable subscriptions are at their all-time low at 40% within the Philadelphia market. And in direct contrast, we're seeing the increased viewership in OTT and the impressions being delivered against that audience. So we're moving with the population.
Yeah, 100%. And I think what's interesting is, outside of kind of the platforms, is what sort of programming political ends up being. I know in previous discussions as we were preparing, you had mentioned, news and sports, which those are kind of the last kind of bastion of why people have cable, but that's transitioning as well. Like, do you think that will kind of continue to be the programming that political advertisers buy?
I hope not. I hope that they don't jump to CTV sports, because that is cost advantageous for our clients. But I do see that happening. I mean, even in the state and local races, like I said, if you can't pay to play and be in the Purdue game and March Madness in that market because it is so expensive, you might go to connected TV. So we could definitely see that happening.
That's exactly what happened, Amanda. I'm sorry. We did pivot and we moved the dollars from cable TV into CTV within their select geographic areas and zip codes, and the impressions delivered at 120%.
Yeah, so there you go. So the everyday advertiser is moving there. So it's only a matter of time, if the politicians aren't already, that they do the same. And I know we lightly touched upon it, but I want to go back to it. TikTok, because I do feel like we mentioned it. They do restrict advertising, but I think some audience members might actually question that, because I'm sure that they have seen people on TikTok, not necessarily in an ad way, but President Biden, other people who are up for election are leveraging TikTok. Despite what you're hearing in the news about TikTok, they are leveraging it to reach the younger audiences.